Welcome to AlphaTalk, where we discuss all things auto. From F&I to industry updates, AlphaTalk is here to keep you in the loop.
Welcome to AlphaTalk. Today's guest is Kathleen Long. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us again. For those of you who listened to our show for a while, Kathleen's been a guest on our show from RepairPal. She's a Chief Revenue Officer, just a huge advocate for women in the auto industry, has very active in that community, and really just the auto space in general. So Kathleen, thank you again for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, today, I really wanted to, we had a lot we could talk about. You're very well versed in the auto industry, been doing it for a long time. In fact, why don't you kind of, if you don't mind, maybe our guests that don't know you or your history, maybe just talk a little bit about.
How dare they?
I know, right? There's that one out
right,
there,
right? Yeah, no, I'm sure there are plenty.
Just your background would be great, and reintroduce yourself to our audience if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with RepairPal now for almost 12 years. A little over a year ago. Yeah, right? More than a decade. Yes. And a little over a year ago, we were acquired by Yelp.
Well, just that small company.
Yeah.
Some people have heard about.
Yeah. About as many people have heard of me and Yelp. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's about the same. But yeah, so we were acquired, and so we're still operating as RepairPal. We're a wholly owned subsidiary at this point.
Great.
So that's awesome.
I'm sure that's been exciting and crazy and challenging all its own right.
Yeah. Look, once we got past the actual acquisition, it's actually been pretty smooth.
Yeah.
But yeah, being in that swirl of
Yes.
like, will they, won't they, are they not, and getting your companies sort of positioned for that and through all those milestones is a big deal.
We've had you on. It's been a couple of years now, but congratulations first and foremost.
Thanks.
That's a huge accomplishment, and especially for somebody in your role where you really have kind of helped push the company into that space. Going from 12 years ago, I'm sure RepairPal wasn't near what it is obviously today, and then to be acquired by a publicly traded company is pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we first joined, we had fewer than 500 shops on service. We're now over 4,300.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we built that, one shop, one certification at a time. So, that's been an amazing growth curve for RepairPal. So that's one. And we were in this little tiny office that people used to call the sweatshop, not because they made us work too hard, but because it had no air conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
It was on the second floor, and it was just quite literally very hot in the summertime.
Now tell me, does that Yelp money help buy AC? Are you all right now?
Well, it does. And Yelp is like a fully remote company, as is RepairPal at this point.
Yeah.
We went remote during the pandemic, never came back, and Yelp just kind of characterizes it as the way they do business.
Yeah.
And so we have a distributed workforce.
That's very cool.
Both, nationally, and now Yelp has international employees as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's incredible. In all that time, I know how much work it takes for somebody in your role, especially as a Chief Revenue Officer, to really, kind of navigate the acquisition. You're still very actively involved in women in the auto industry. Just share quickly with our guests kind of what you're doing in that space. I always want to make sure we give you, and look, we'll have plenty of time to talk and have hopefully you'll come back
Yes.
and have an episode as we kind of get closer to some of the other events that are coming up. I know you just finished one, but for our guests that may not know, we are very active in that community as well, and love to give kind of a space for women in the auto space. Talk about what you're doing in that area specifically right now.
Yeah, so I am part of the Council for Women in Auto Care, and that is a division of the Auto Care Association overall. And the goal of Women in Auto Care is to fund scholarships for women in the industry. So all the money that we raise and all of the things that we do are primarily aimed around that, and also, just elevating women in the industry. And there are women involved from, shop owners, technicians, to, parts distributors, to companies more like RepairPal. So there are a lot of different kinds of companies that are involved in that space, and it's been really great. I've been involved with them since I joined RepairPal, and a colleague said, hey, you ought to join Women in Auto Care, and I said, sure. And so then a couple years ago, I joined the council, and my role there is virtual events.
Oh, yeah.
So we do, like 3 different events a year where we feature, educational topics. Those topics typically aren't women oriented. They just
Yeah.
so happen to be put on by women in
Yeah,
auto
yeah.
care and have women
I
attendees
love
and
it.
women speaking about industry topics. But women are doing everything in the industry that
Yeah.
men are doing, essentially. So.
And I'm sure you've seen that shift too over the, just more and more women being interested, especially on the auto care side.
Yeah, I mean, then that's the goal, is that the auto industry in general has a space for everyone,
Yeah.
and we just want everyone to know that.
Yeah, no, and you've obviously been a champion, but just, it's been so great getting to know you and kind of following your career and where you guys are at. Know that we're definitely, would love to support that. With that said, what's your next event if somebody's listening? Because I want to dive into the topic. It's a really interesting topic that you actually had suggested, and I think that there's a lot of legislation that's happening out there, and I want to talk about this specific piece of legislation. That said, I do want to give you a chance to just talk. Where if you're a woman or anybody who's in the auto space but wants to be involved in your organization, how do they find you?
Well, I try to make myself really easy to find. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can go to RepairPal.com and connect with us that way. I'm speaking at a number of events this year, so I'll be speaking for example, at Used Car Summit coming
Yes.
up. We hold our own educational webinars as well. And again, some of those are on sort of diversity and inclusion in the auto care space, and some of those are about other topics entirely.
Yeah.
But I talk a lot about partnerships and leadership development and things like that.
That's great.
I have my own podcast.
That's great.
Lots
I
of
would,
stuff.
we should turn the tables on the next one. I'd love to be a
Yes,
guest.
I would love for you to. That would be amazing.
We were joking before he came on air, and I was teasing Kathleen that I was going to be Barbara Walters and try to make her cry. I hope we don't, because this piece of legislation, hopefully it's not that scary, but I think that you're kind of a leading expert in it. It's the Right to Repair Act. Some new legislation that's come out. I know that Massachusetts just passed, some specific legislation for their state, but really you are kind of in my opinion, one of the experts that understands what that is and what it means for not only shop owners, but your average day consumer. So I'd love to jump into that. That being said, for our listeners who may not know what this is, can you explain a little bit about what this Right to Repair Act is and kind of, in the context of today's market, and maybe how that's kind of changed from the way business has been done over the last 10 years or 5 years?
Yeah, so now we're in a space where consumers have access to more technology than ever. And as you may know, that technology knows an awful lot about you.
Right.
And so Right to Repair in the broadest sense is really about all of the different pieces of technology that you might buy, and your right to, as the owner of those technologies, your right to get those repaired where you would like to have them repaired. So it is actually broader than automotive. In the context of the automotive industry, what we're specifically talking about, obviously, is your car.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a rolling computer these days, right? And so there's a lot of argument about sort of who owns the data and what's going on. So the Auto Care Association really stands for the automotive aftermarket in this regard. I also volunteer directly with them. I'm on the marketing committee, which is a way of spreading the word about Right to Repair. April just so happens to be Car Care Month, so let's get after it. And there's a lot of ways that people can be involved, but what it boils down to is it's basically about the consumer's right to choose. It's your information that these pieces of technology are collecting.
Yeah.
Where do you want to share this information? Where do you want to have your, in this case, vehicle repaired? And shouldn't that be up to you? You're the one paying for it.
Right. And I think, as consumers, one of the things that's been really interesting for your average consumer, and I consider myself one of them, even being very tech savvy and, I try to stay on top of trends. A lot of times consumers don't understand that digital fingerprint that's being left on the car. There's, every time you plug your phone into the car to do your Apple CarPlay, there's technology that is recording some of those transactions. You're actually signing in and allowing them to have access to some of that data. And I think that that's actually really, really, it can be scary. But I think it's just something that I think your average consumer doesn't even think about.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, because we're now doing that, that is an argument that the original equipment manufacturers or OEMs are using to restrict access to other kinds of records that your car stores, which is, fault codes and repair codes and repair diagnostic information and things like that. And again, as a consumer, you should have the right to have that data and to share that data with whoever you want, including yourself.
Yeah.
So there's some DIYers out there that would love to be able to plug in a self-purchased scan tool and figure out what's going on with their car and maybe do some of their own work, or take it to an independent repair shop or whatever. All of that consumer very private information, like where you drove your car or all of your contacts or whatever else it has mined from the data, are not things that, for example, the average independent repair shop is looking to acquire. It's really on the repair side, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need to know? What are the schematics? What do you need to know to safely and properly and completely repair the car?
Right, and I think that's such a key piece of it. A lot of times it's like, when you I kind of equate it, and again, I'll use my crayon to draw this, but for me, I equate it to like when you go to your doctor and you're having a physical and the doctor says, well, how many hours are you working out a week? And of course you lie and say, oh, I work out 30 minutes a day. And they ask you, well, how many do you drink? And you say yes. And they're like, well, how many drinks? And you of course lie and you say, well, just 1 or 2 a week or whatever, right? I think that's the thing is like there's this consumer data that a lot of times your car is it's a mechanical, it's going to break down and it's going to wear out, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing is like your shop is trying to get you. There are these shops that really want to do the right thing by the customer.
Absolutely.
And I think RepairPal does a great job of really highlighting those. But if you don't know what's actually gone on, then how do you know how to fix it? And sometimes, especially now in the market that we're in, where used cars are being held on to longer. Maybe you bought a used car because of affordability. You don't know what that past owner or past owners have done for the last 90 or 100,000 miles. So there could be something that's triggered in that response that if you have to take it to an OEM only, you're really at a disadvantage, right?
Yeah, you're definitely at a disadvantage, and also often from a cost perspective. So one of the reasons that consumers might want to use an independent auto repair shop is because of the cost difference. In some cases, it's also a service difference. But ultimately, if you choose to take your car to the dealership, great.
Yeah.
The dealer should, have access to that information, but so should an independent repair shop. And by the way, a lot of dealers actually aren't that opposed to independent repair shops having the information. This is really happening at the original equipment manufacturer level, where they're reluctant to share. So what we see now is we see individual states enacting certain legislation. We see individual car manufacturers, some of which are way more cooperative than others. But that just puts the independent repair shop at the mercy of whatever state they're in or whatever manufacturer they might be dealing with, which what a lot of people don't know is that there are subscriptions required in order to have current information. So shops are literally paying manufacturer by manufacturer for this information and still not getting the complete set of information oftentimes that they need to repair the car or access to certain systems to do a complete and thorough repair, because all of these cars now have advanced driver assistance systems, or what we call ADAS systems in them.
Right.
And those are to help you not bump into things or whatever. And all of those systems need to be calibrated. They're all connected to electrical and computer-based systems inside of the car. And so really completing a repair often means doing a recalibration of certain systems depending on what repair you did, even if it wasn't related to that in the first place. And so really having that thorough set of information, access, et cetera, to completely and thoroughly repair the car is what's needed so that they can get you back on the road, not just fixing your core complaint, but also all the ancillary systems that actually need to be, calibrated or reviewed as part of that repair as well.
And there's that damage, or there's that concern too. If you don't do all those subsidiary things, you could cause future damage, right? And now you're going to be in this vicious cycle where you're going to, if it wasn't calibrated right, you could have higher repairs down the road or more frequent repairs. I think that's part of the conversation.
Yeah, and look, anybody who has driven one of those cars that has all the bells and whistles, knows that then when you go rent a car
Yeah.
and maybe you got the budget car or whatever and it doesn't do all of those things, how reliant you've become, on them. And so if you think they're working correctly and you're using the backup camera, as we do or whatever, and it's not calibrated properly, then guess what happens?
Yeah.
Right. And it creates a safety situation for you, other cars,
Yeah,
stationary
yeah,
objects.
Yes. I was going to say, in the case of my wife, the curb at the Starbucks she didn't see because the sensor was a little too low. So.
Or maybe she hadn't had her coffee yet.
Yeah, that was probably it, I'm sure. And now too, even something simple as the rearview mirrors. A lot of these cars, they're cameras. There's not even a rearview mirror there. So the safety aspect on top of just the repair side. And I know we're kind of picking a little bit on the OEMs, but for them, obviously, it's a good business model. They can keep that customer in that life cycle. I know. And look, I don't get sponsored by Tesla, so we can pick on them a little bit. But you have to, Tesla is one of those manufacturers that they really are completely insulated in a lot of ways. You have to go there for repairs. You have to a lot of times go there until recently, last 5 years. You're going there for charging. You're going there to buy the car. You buy their used car there. I mean, everything is really done at Tesla, and it's you're kind of at the mercy and hoping that they're doing the right thing by the repairs or what needs to be done, because there's nobody else that could even look at it.
Well, and then that's where you're hearing horror stories of something went wrong with my car. And then my Tesla sat in my garage for 3 months because I was on a backlog list for whatever the Tesla dealer was in my area, and they couldn't get to the car, and Tesla didn't unlock it for anyone else. So now it's just sitting there. And most of us, don't have it like that.
Yeah.
We can't afford for cars to sit in the garage unused for 3 months at a time. Not your daily driver, right? That's what you use to get your family around, go to work, or whatever. And so that's really why choice is so important. I mean, we did some campaigning with the Auto Care Association on Capitol Hill in September of last year.
Yeah.
So that was a great experience. I had so much fun. And because our company is based in California, we were meeting with the California lawmakers, even though I'm in Colorado.
Yeah.
So I got the opportunity to meet with Ro Khanna, who is sponsoring right to repair legislation. It's a true bipartisan issue, by the way, so you don't have to be affiliated with one political party or another. Both Democrats and Republicans are coming together in the House and Senate to sponsor this legislation, because it really is about protecting the consumers that are in their districts and areas. And what we were saying to the California lawmakers and trying to convince them was, look, there are more auto repair shops capable of doing these repairs in the state of California than there are dealers of any make in the entire country.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that
what
is
a powerful,
really,
what a
it's
powerful
about this.
statement.
It's about the speed. It's about the convenience.
Yeah.
It's about getting things in your neighborhood. Repair shops are hyper local businesses, right?
Yeah.
They are part of the community. They don't just serve the community. Oftentimes, they're very participatory in the community. They want to do the right thing for their neighbors, and we just need to give them the information so that they can do their jobs.
And that is really the case of a lot of these shops they're typically like mom and pop shops, especially on the independent side. It's not like they have multiple locations. They rely on really servicing that local community, within a 50-mile radius typically, right, of where they're based out of, and to handcuff them and not be able to serve those communities, where now you're not only are you taking that customer and the ability for that customer to now, instead of walking to get their car, they now have to either spend more money in an Uber, or maybe they're on a backlog, like you said, at a franchise dealership. You're now taking the opportunity for, maybe they have a great experience, because there's a lot of fantastic franchise dealers out there who do the right thing. That customer could have been going to that independent shop for 10 years and really propping up that in that individual who's really their livelihood is based off of the customer base. Now you're giving that customer to somebody else just because they can't work on it.
Right, and let's talk about the franchise dealers. So a lot of them are selling used cars these days. You all know this.
Yeah.
And so, Toyota has a great certified program, for example. So you go to Toyota and you buy a Chrysler, something through their certified program. Now you love them because they gave you great service and you want to take the car back there. Right to repair also serves them because it means they'll be able to, sufficiently work on a make that's not on their masthead.
Yeah.
Right? Because they have this access to the information. If they pay for the subscriptions and they pay for the details, then they should be able to get those and work on the car that you purchased there because you want to be loyal to that specific location because they've given you great service. Why should you not be able to do that? Again, it's about your ability to choose.
Yeah. It's almost like, I know this is probably a terrible analogy, but it's like you take your kid to a daycare and then all of a sudden your kid gets into like a specialized program and you're like, okay, I'm just going to give it to the next person and hope that they actually care for this child the way that I've experienced over here. I mean, we're so tied to our vehicles and there's the ability to I can tell you there's 90% of people, which is also why RepairPal exists, is to be able to share the information on the good experiences that people are having in these shops. And so you really do create this this kinship with the people that, you have a good experience, you want to bring it back, and then you tell all your friends to bring it back. When you can't do that because of this artificial, unfair business practice, essentially, right? It really kind of makes you feel like you're taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, again, as the consumer, we've seen used car prices are new car prices are certainly right.
Affordability is like the main thing
and so
in
you're
America
paying
right
even
now.
more money, and so you really should have the choice of where you're taking that car for service, and you should be able to optimize for convenience, speed, and quality. Ultimately.
Yeah, and I know, we've kind of talked a little bit about the benefits to the consumer. Obviously, that affordability is the biggest factor in a lot of things that we're seeing, especially now. I mean, I think when people are paying $2 more for gas than they were, a month ago, you can't afford to, you're pinching every penny. So then to have to take it into a specific Ford store because you have a Ford is really, it's problematic. And it's not fair competition. And it's interesting to me, and maybe you can shed a little bit of light on this from your perspective, being kind of that front runner, that leader at Capitol Hill. We have the FTC that doesn't allow monopolies. Why has this gone on for so long? Why have we allowed this why have we allowed the manufacturers to really create unfair business practice in a lot of ways?
Yeah, so it's just absence of legislation. There's not legislation that specifically prohibits it.
Right.
It's just absence of federal legislation. So auto repair is often adjudicated at the state level. So for example, RepairPal exists to certify shops because in most states and most localities, the only thing you need to start an auto repair shop is a business license.
Yeah.
Now, that's not true in every state. Some states have governing bodies and a greater set of standards, but oftentimes states don't have that. So it's been hard for consumers to know, what's a good auto repair shop? What's the language of quality? What questions should I be asking? Who's really great? Who's not? Et cetera. And so we, have our certified network as the answer to that. So similarly, the federal government has allowed states to sort of operate the way that they want to operate around this. And our cars have grown sophisticated in ways, that we couldn't have imagined. It used to be much easier in the old days to get a wiring diagram and just rewire the car, or
a lot of times they were in the owner's manual, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And people were doing their own repairs much more often and so forth. So the technology of the car and the ways in which you need to subscribe to various things in order to actually, reset the control modules to have access to the flash updates and this kind of stuff is way different than just having sort of a diagram of the engine or wiring harness or whatever as you did in the old days. And so that rapid ascent of technology has outpaced the legislation designed to protect the consumer. And so that's why, we're advocating for it. And there's a lot of things, obviously going on legislatively and otherwise in the country. And some of those things have been distractions from some of the consumer protection stuff. But there are nonprofits, including the Auto Care Association, but others that span across industries, as consumer watchdogs, looking out and trying to advocate for this federal legislation that ultimately would trickle down and be requirements in the states, so that we're not waiting for one state at a time to institute protections. And by the way, it's not just about that. The Auto care aftermarket is a $2 billion with a B dollar industry. And so really we're talking about people who work for parts manufacturers, people who work for, fluid manufacturers, packaging, all of the different things that go into an automotive supply chain, ultimately ending up at your, Main Street auto repair shop. And so, which was deemed an essential service in 2020 when we went into the pandemic, which I know probably people are tired of hearing that word. It's like a bad word.
It's funny. I have people that are like, oh, it's like, it was last year's news. It's so funny. Yeah.
But I mean, when that happened, local auto repair shops were deemed essential services, just like hospitals and, other things. They're an essential part of our community and the way that we live life and do business. And many of them are contributing significantly to the local economy. They're $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million businesses, depending on where they are and how large they are, and so forth. And so they're an important part of not just getting your car fixed, but actually part of your local economy and tax registers and all of that kind of stuff. And so really, if we gut that industry, we as a country economically we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that there's been some studies done. The Economist and me would point out that when you don't have access to a vehicle or your car's broken down, you also aren't distributing the money in a wider path, right? You're not actually going out to the movies or going to a concert or whatever. It's you're really centralized where your spending goes, and a lot of times that means less spending, right? So to your point, it's
absolutely.
Like this. Not only are we really kind of gutting the business owner, but we're also limiting what the consumer can do and how we can actually keep moving in the economy as a consumer.
Yeah, I mean, and I, so once a year, I will kind of poke around at my network or I'll look on Facebook or something like this, and I pick a family and I pay for their car repair. It's just something I do. And so I found a family this year, and they had bought a car they should never have purchased. They didn't have it pre-inspected, always a good idea. They didn't have an extended warranty on it, always a good idea. When you have this older car, and it had like 200,000 miles on it, and honestly, it should have been fine. It's a Subaru. It was a great model car and all of that. But the problem is it just wasn't properly maintained, which is going to be a problem. And so they went to a dealer and they got a quote from a dealer for repairs that was more than the car came off the line for in the year it was manufactured. And so they're on, like Facebook's sort of Buy Nothing group, just sort of freaking out, looking for advice, actually. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And so, over a process, sort of reached out to them or whatever, moved them into an independent repair shop, had the repair shop diagnose, say, what are the red issues, what's actually critical, what's going to make this car, roadworthy and safe. By the way, the gal, part of this couple was, 8 months pregnant. Right. Her husband relies on the car to get back and forth from work. They're on the precipice, on the very edge, as many Americans are. Yeah. And the car is the difference between having a job and not having a job, being homeless or having a house, right? And it's, this is the reason why I do this once a year, is because I want to, that's not my situation. I actually go to the dealer because I lease my car and I don't want to monkey with, used car problems. But so this is my way of understanding, what's really going on and hearing the stories and really feeling that. And that's the reason why we should enable people to go where they need to go, because there's just no way they were going to be able to afford that. They would have had to walk away from the car. Yeah,
and likely not been able to get into another one, because you're typically not buying, even if you like Subaru, you're not buying a 200,000 mile car because you want to. It's a necessity. It's the best car that you could find at the price you could afford. Yeah. And there's not another option. Yeah,
they spent all of their savings on that car. Yeah. And we're living like very close to the edge afterward. And so many consumers are like that. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about, the consumer and the benefit of the consumer. So I'm going to ask you, and maybe it's kind of like, maybe this is the Barbara Walters moment. Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because you've advocated for, the right to repair and just consumer rights, even at the federal level, which is incredible. I'm going to ask you, let's just switch hats for a second. I'm going to be devil's advocate here. What would you say? I can see the argument being made by the manufacturers, right? We're the ones that own the technology. We're pushing the data downstream, right? Mm-hmm. Even we're constantly, there's development that has to go in to all of these systems. It's not like just because it's like your phone. Your phone gets updated by Apple or whatever your manufacturer is. Sometimes I feel like with Apple, it's like on a weekly basis. And I'm like, nothing changed. I don't know what you actually fixed, but I got the update that you did it. There's probably an argument for the manufacturers to say, we're putting in our development time. We're doing this. We should be able to own that. And by proxy, we should own that market to be able to, understand the revenue from that, because we have to do all the development to get there and maintain it. What would you say to the manufacturer who's saying, this is our technology, our data, we created it, we're maintaining it? What would be your response to something like that?
Well, I think for consumer protection, we do need to carve moats around certain things. So some of that personal information that your car is actually collecting about you should be off limits.
Right.
And
I think, hopefully, unless you're Elon or the administration, you probably would say, yes, that's an accurate statement.
Right. Yes. Well, and for that matter, we should really understand how the manufacturers are using it too.
Yeah.
But I think that's important, and that's not what the independent repair shop should have access to, and that's not what they're asking to have access to. That's not what right to repair legislation is about. But I think that's an important call out. The second thing is that the manufacturers do a lot of R&D. It's much more difficult now to distinguish one car from another, and on the basis of like the scantest of, difference between features. And a lot of people are buying cars based on the specific configurations that they're looking for and things like that. And the manufacturers put a lot of time and energy into figuring out what configurations to offer and what markets. There's a lot of market research that goes into that, because what works in South Dakota is not necessarily what people are looking for in California, right? So there is a lot of micro-analysis that sort of goes into what features, what markets, how to produce that at a cost that makes sense. There are federal requirements around specific features being there, and, tax breaks that manufacturers can get or not get based on, having things that reduce environmental impact, for example, and that kind of stuff. So it's not easy to create an affordable car in this economic environment. And, now we've got tariffs, and we've got, other disincentives around certain features. And there are cars sitting there now that, when we were doing the EV push, the consumers and manufacturers were getting incentives for things. Now they no longer are, and they've got this surplus inventory, and they've got to move that. It's not easy. And so I believe and respect that. We don't want anybody to be able to reverse engineer the car. Yeah. And particularly if you're going to share, schematics and other things for the Chrysler with the Toyota dealer from my earlier example, then you don't want for that R&D to be completely exposed. Right. So we do need to create moats around some of this stuff and really focus on the things that can go wrong in the car. We also don't want to expose any of the car's security systems. There are things that should go back to
from
the
national
dealer.
Security issues, right? 100%.
And for consumer security and all of that. So there are specific things we should draw bright lines around and be very clear about those. And those are not systems that right to repair legislation is aiming toward. Although, if you look at some of the hyperbole that surrounds this whole issue, you'll, as a consumer, you'll hear otherwise. But really, if you carefully read the legislation, if you're that sort of person, which is very dense, I will say that, then, what you'll see is that there are bright lines drawn around those things. And by the way, this doesn't just affect the consumer in the car. This also has a strong impact on our farming industry and farm equipment, which actually original equipment manufacturers for tractors and very specialized farm equipment are a big part of the overall automotive ecosystem as we think of heavy duty and in that realm. And so there's a strong impact to our farmers as well and their ability to operate affordably. And so it extends beyond just the consumer and their car, this issue. But we do need to draw lines around all of that because manufacturers absolutely have the right to have proprietary details about the cars that they've created for us to, choose from them.
And look, I think the manufacturers they usually are on the other side of a lot of the discussion that we have in this room, and I think some of it's probably earned, but I do think that there is this component of this is as you're collecting that data, to your point earlier, if you're a consumer who's going out and let's say you are in California. and all you have access to are four-wheel drive trucks in California, that may not be what you need. Maybe you want a truck, but there's very few times that, let's take it down into the micro communities like Southern California. Typically, most people aren't looking for those types of vehicles. They may want a truck, but now the manufacturers understand what's selling, what models, what technology features really are in these different market segments, and they're able to service those customers from an inventory perspective way better than they would otherwise if they were just kind of in the dark.
Yeah, that's right. And the original equipment manufacturers also have a little bit of a dicey job, right? So they have to keep their franchise dealerships happy and well-fed and give them the right data and equip them with the right inventory to make sales. And then post that, how do they make money? Well, they make money by pushing parts.
Yeah.
And so how do you push parts? The most efficient way to push parts is through your dealerships. And you only do that if cars return to the dealership for service and repair. And many dealerships are doing the right thing. I love my dealership. Yeah. I'm super happy with them. And so, I think that's all great. I also think there's a little bit of penny wise, pound foolish going on, because really, if your goal is to get parts distribution, you could do that so much more effectively by allowing the aftermarket to work on cars, and then being competitive in the parts arena with some of the aftermarket parts suppliers and so forth. The parts distribution would be, I think the gains from the parts distribution would be enormous. And there are some manufacturers who realize that and who are being more open and who are looking at this as an opportunity and more of a co-opetition kind of landscape between dealers and aftermarket shops that ultimately improves.
Well, let's say we had there's so many examples, and you hear it more than anybody probably, but unfortunately, if let's say you just had the franchise dealers, right? That's your base to take it back to. There's a lot of franchise dealers where even in our space, we try to drive business back to our partners, but they just say, no, we can't actually take any more business. And so what we're doing is, they're having to turn customers away that they would normally like to service, but they're at their max capacity in a lot of ways. There's not as many technicians out there working. And so they've either gone to operate their own independent shops or they've left the market completely. And so I think that it is such it's not like one or the other. It's like one or, everybody can win, or we can have this situation where the consumer really does lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's what the legislation aims to fix. And I do think we're seeing really positive signals from the Hill. And I really do think this is an issue whose time has come, and we're going to see things move forward in a positive way, which is exciting. But I would say, if you want to advocate for these things, you go to the Auto Care Association's website. They've made it really easy to shoot notes to whoever your local representatives might be about this particular issue. If you're an auto repair shop or technician and you tried to fix it and you weren't able to get the correct information for the repair, then there's a campaign called Can't Fix It, Report It.
Oh, yeah.
That you can engage with.
Very cool.
And so, they can start collecting data and know exactly where to advocate in order to try to get better information into the hands of the repair shop or even the DIYer.
Yeah. Now, let me ask on that. You've mentioned you've obviously been really at the forefront of the legislation and being on Capitol Hill. You've seen manufacturers even kind of, some kind of come around. What do you think, looking ahead, what do you think consumers should be looking for in terms of legislation? Do you see this kind of more community of people getting and kind of rallying around it, because they're not, from the business side, which I'm a capitalist, I totally understand that side of it. But they're saying, look, we're still going to make our money. We're still going to have our consumer base as long as we're taking care of our customers. And that's a completely separate issue than being legislated that they have to come here. Do you see more restriction, more kind of, these entities kind of saying, look, we're gonna enforce our power, our legal teams to really fight against this legislation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I wouldn't be working on this if I didn't think it would ultimately be successful. I think it will. I think we're going to have some tangles or tussles over where those bright lines lie around some of the areas that we talked about earlier for just protection of information, R&D protection for the OEMs and so forth. So I think we'll see some of those arguments ongoing. I do think the luxury car makes in particular are going to dig in their heels a little bit more.
I mean, that's kind of like, right? How many times have you heard, well, I don't have a tool for that Land Rover, or, I don't have a
Porsche.
tool for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A specialized tool that we have to get from overseas.
Yeah, and some of these, the hard part for repair shops is, like, we've got a European shop that's owned by a friend of mine in California, and they pay lots of money for these subscriptions to Porsche and so forth. But then literally, if the hood is being opened on a Porsche and it's not at a dealership, it's sending a ping to the OEM about where it is.
Really?
Yes, when the hood is open.
Wow.
And then it locks certain systems in the car. So even though they're paying for the subscription to the information, which they're not asking for this for free. Yeah. So again, it's an opportunity. But yeah, the car will literally lock, and so it's one of those can't repair report situations.
Yeah. And I'm sure their argument is, well, we don't want anybody who's not like an authorized dealer to mess up our car when,
Right. It is a brand experience that you're having, in that car. But, the average age of the car on the road is 13 plus years.
Yeah.
There are plenty of older Porsches.
Yeah.
Those aren't going to be a priority for a dealer, right? Dealers are honestly prioritizing the cars that they're hoping they'll flip you. They're hoping, hey, you'll bring this car in for repair, and then they'll be like, well, you've had this car for 3 years. Maybe you're feeling like it's time to, turn it in or whatever, and we'll put you in a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's going to be a priority for them, is to get those cars in service lanes. As opposed to, the really much older ones and so forth.
Yeah.
So
there is that kind of life cycle that you want to have the dealers, experience, and there is that customer that wants that, right? But I think all you're saying is we just want customers to have a choice, and we want them to have a fair choice and the ability to decide where they want to take their car. Just like almost any other industry, you can decide where you want to take something to get repaired, or who your doctor is, or where your kid goes to daycare. I think that's really what we're saying. Yeah,
that's right. And a lot of customers don't realize they're opting into the quote-unquote HMO model when they buy a car. That doesn't even enter their mind.
Yeah.
They're thinking, well, I'm buying this car because it's, like what I did, because it's the color that I want. And the heads-up display is awesome. You're not thinking about, I'm buying this because I want to be part of this dealership's HMO program where I have to go back only to the dealer.
10 years or whatever. What's the average age of a car now, or, life cycle of a car?
Right, exactly.
Well, let me ask you this. In a perfect world, the legislation gets passed, and let's say, take it even a step further, it gets passed to the level that, it's not gutted. It really is in its entirety to protect the consumer. What do you feel like would be the biggest visible change for your average daily consumer in the first year? What would that look like? What would I experience as a consumer?
Well, quite frankly, I think cars are going to be safer on the road, because now, they're going to be completely repaired. So the option that a lot of shops have is to give you the car back and they've solved your core issue, but maybe they haven't recalibrated, or they weren't able to do the flash update or whatever. And so ultimately then you end up with a double, repair situation where you've got to take it to the dealer for the final step, which is added aggravation, time, etc. I think repair gets a little bit more affordable because now you've got true competition and true options. And then ultimately, freedom of choice that's protected by legislation. So it's not going to matter, what make you buy or whatever. And so that's not something that you're going to have to think about when you go buy a car is this a cooperative or non-cooperative manufacturer, which a lot of people don't even know, how to think about that.
Now, let me ask on that just real quick, because I do think RepairPal's done some amazing things over the past decade, obviously with the acquisition and that reach getting even more so with Yelp. If somebody's looking, I think this is great legislation. It's legislation, so nothing happens overnight. It takes time to kind of go through the process. Is there ability for a consumer, if they're wanted to, and they wanted to know, hey, my manufacturer, this independent shop, I can go to RepairPal. Can they go on and see that they have the ability to actually service their vehicle?
Yes. So we do certification, not just of the shop's quality and customer satisfaction and all of that in general, but we also certify make by make.
Oh, yeah.
So when you filter, then you're filtering for a shop that can actually work on that car.
That's great. Well, and like I said, I think you're doing some great things. I love to hear just your willingness to help out people who may not be able to afford it. It's such a I've known you, so I know how you are, and it's it's very, very Kathleen. But understanding, kind of putting yourself in that consumer's shoes probably makes you even more of an advocate for these types of legislation. And I can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing there. I would ask, if anybody, if you're interested in this side or want to be engaged, please connect with Kathleen. And hopefully these things just make sense. I think we can all agree that, especially now, affordability is not, to your earlier point, it's not a political issue, it's a human issue, and it's going to be more and more that. And so I just appreciate you advocating for the consumer, advocating for really why RepairPal was started, and continuing that mission. So thank you, and thank you for being a guest. I really hope there's so much that I would love to unpack in so many different areas, and so I hope we can get you back. I know you're close
Absolutely.
in Denver. I'll fly out there too. So yeah, we'll do. Yeah.
Well, I don't have this whole amazing setup, but I would be happy to host you.
Yes. We'll just we'll just put like your colors or whatever, your background. We can do that. So our producers already said that he's ready to start franchising this model out.
Oh, I love that.
But thank you so much for, again, being a guest, always being so open and transparent, and really just being an advocate for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
AlphaTalk is an Alpha Warranty Services production. Learn more at alphawarranty.com.